But on the other hand, I guess it's not supposed to be easy. Yes, Dick?
I was kind of waiting for him to say something about the Magi versus the shepherds.
Yeah. He didn't, so I will. Okay. No, it's really interesting because if you're sort of like a casual Christian, and you all aren't casual Christians because you come every Sunday, but you know those ones who show up on Easter and Christmas and things like this. And if you've looked at a lot of Christmas cards, you are under the understanding that the Magi and the shepherds were all there at the same time, right? Well, that's absolutely not true because those stories are two distinct stories and they occur in different Gospels. The Magi occur in the Gospel of Matthew. There's a really good reason for this, and that is because, as he made very clear, Christ in the Gospel of Matthew is portrayed as a Jewish Messiah, right? And a fulfillment of the Old Testament, and he's a Messiah. He's that longed-for king who's going to come and who is going to, well, in the minds of the Jews, restore perhaps David's kingdom. They don't quite understand what he's doing. But if he's a Messiah, if he's the king, the longed-for king, it's really important if you have these wise men come to show their respect for him, and they're led by a star, right? And you also get as part of that nativity or that birth story, Herod is scared to death of this because there's this child, this Christ child, is a threat to him as king. Okay. And so you get the story of the Magi in Matthew, but then you get a completely different story in the Gospel of Luke, because as he's talking about in the Gospel of Luke, you get a real emphasis on Jesus' message being given to people who are marginalized, to people who are on the lower end of society, to people who are really having a tough time of it. And who comes to worship Jesus when he's born there? It's not these Magi who are bringing gifts. It's the poor shepherds who are out in the field, right? So it really helps to set that entire sense of who Jesus is in the Gospel of Luke. Yeah, it's interesting that he didn't pick up on that, but I was thinking about that as a matter of fact. Yeah. Okay. And any other questions or observations about this? Yes, please go ahead, Mike.
Today is the last class of this series.
It is, yeah.
I'm disappointed that we didn't get to the Gospel of John, because the Gospel of John is so
Completely
different than all the others. Will you do a class maybe
We will.
someday?
Well, Professor Ehrman will do a class.
Yeah, okay, yeah, right, yeah, okay,
Yeah.
great.
No,
Okay.
we will follow up on that, yeah. One thing I would like to challenge here is when Professor Ehrman keeps talking about Jesus as a prophet. And this was sort of one of the center elements of his or his analysis. And he said that Jesus was born like a prophet, he preached like a prophet, he healed like a prophet, and he died like a prophet. And while there may be something to that, I wonder if Luke is actually writing this gospel for a non-Jewish audience, and we're pretty sure that's what he's doing, because he follows up Luke with the book of Acts, right? And the book of Acts is all about getting the gospel out to non-Jews, that is, to the Gentiles. Why would it make any difference to a Gentile audience that Jesus is a prophet? That would hold resonance if you were in fact a Jewish audience, but if this book was meant for a Gentile audience, why does that make sense? What if you substitute for the word prophet a holy man, right? In other words, what these people, these non-Jewish people, would pick up on this and what would resonate with them is that Jesus was born like a holy man, right? There were really, really special circumstances surrounding his birth. He preaches like a holy man, he heals like a holy man, and he dies like a holy man. And my sense is that this would make, it would just resonate better with the intended audience of this book, rather than saying that Jesus is a prophet, because the Gentile audience, they didn't know anything about Jewish prophets, right? But they would be familiar with holy men walking in their midst. Our best sense is that this gospel was written probably because he's, as best we can make out, he was, whoever the author was, he was a companion of Paul. And so what that means is that this gospel is going to be written for an audience in Greece and in Asia Minor. That is a non-Jewish audience, Gentiles, probably Greek-speaking, because the gospel itself was written in Greek. And I'm much more comfortable seeing the portrayal here of Jesus as a holy man, right? A holy man rather than as a Jewish prophet. Pastor Jim, you want to add anything to this? I mean, I saw you watching the video back there.
Yeah, I think it's great.
Yeah. Any other questions or observations?
I can say I showed you that book.
Yeah.
They had this synopsis. I don't know if you shared it with them,
Yeah, no, I haven't.
but there's actually a synoptic gospel. So it's a book in which every verse in each of the four gospels, including John, are laid out side by side in Greek and in English.
So you see the parallel.
So you can see the parallels of how one might have been used to build on another, and how they're similar and how they're completely different. And these kinds of things really jump out when someone goes in a different direction.
I don't know what your feeling is about this when you read the Gospels and you realize, well, wow, this is different from what I read in Mark, or this is different from what I read in Luke. But I actually enjoy that because I think it gives you a more textured understanding of what is being portrayed, or different ways of looking at a particular instance or a particular message or something like that. So I just think it enriches the whole gospel, the set of gospels, rather than being a threat to them at all. Any other questions or observations? Well, so we got through the Synoptic Gospels. Interesting. It really, really is interesting to see how the audience and the author very much work to shape the way that Jesus is portrayed in these different books of the Bible. But in the end, and I think, you do have to be careful. He warned about this, of conflating the stories. It's very easy to do, just like, you look at those Christmas cards and there's Jesus in a manger, and there are the Magi, and there are the shepherds, and no, it didn't work out that way, There's nothing wrong with that, but it's really not, it's not biblical. That's all there is to it. And, it takes a little bit of effort to keep these things straight, but I think you get a deeper appreciation for early Christianity and for Jesus and how he was presented to people. Okay, so we'll stop there, and don't forget, we have 2 good classes for you next Sunday. Thanks for coming.